Today, we're pulling back the curtain on something you probably do all the time without a second thought: printing. We're going to uncover the secret journey your print job takes inside a huge enterprise system like SAP. It feels so simple, right? You're in your system, you need a hard copy of something, and you just click that little printer icon. But that single click, it kicks off this incredibly complex and honestly pretty elegant process behind the scenes. So let's follow that journey together. We're going to trace it from your screen all the way to the printer tray and reveal the secret life of a print job. And believe me, it all starts the very instant you click. The second you hit print, the system doesn't just make one thing. Nope, it instantly creates two totally separate but equally important components that are going to manage this whole operation. So what are these two things? Well, first you get a spool request. The best way to think of this is like a claim ticket, like at a coat check. It's just a unique number to identify and track your specific print job. At the exact same time, the system makes the spool data. Now, this is not your final pretty document. It's just the raw, unformatted info, kind of like all the raw ingredients for a cake before you've actually mixed them together. So where do these raw ingredients go? They get stashed in a temporary holding area called TEMSI. It's short for Temporary Sequential Database, which is just a fancy way of saying it's a spot designed to hold this raw data before it gets turned into something a printer can understand. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting for the system administrators. They actually have a choice to make about where to store this stuff. They can set a parameter to G, which puts it in the global directory, right on the server's file system. That's super fast, but that file system might not be part of the daily backup routine. The other option is to set it to DB, storing it right inside the database itself. That means it's definitely getting backed up, but it can cause the database to get huge over time. It's a classic trade-off between speed and safety. You can imagine a bank, for example, would probably always choose DB because they need that bulletproof audit trail. Okay, so we have our raw ingredients sitting in storage. How does that turn into a perfectly formatted document? This is where the system gets really smart and splits up the work. The system uses two different kinds of processes to get this done. First, a dialog process. That's the same kind of process that handles you clicking around on the screen. It does the initial quick job of creating the spool request and the raw spool data. Then it immediately hands off the job to a specialized spool process. This guy's only job is to do the heavy lifting, picking up that raw data and formatting it perfectly for the printer. And what comes out at the other end of that spool process? That's what we call an output request. This is it, the finished product. The raw data has been transformed, formatted, and is now ready for a specific printer to actually understand and print, whether that's a check that needs perfect alignment or just a standard report. So if you remember one thing, let it be this distinction right here. It's a super common question in tech interviews. The dialog process creates the spool request. That's the claim ticket and the raw ingredients. But it's the specialized spool process that creates the final formatted output request. Two different processes, two completely different outputs. It's a critical point. All right, our print job is formatted and ready to roll. But in a huge company with maybe thousands of printers all over the world, how in the world does the system know exactly where to send it? How does it find the right path? The answer is something called an access method. You can basically think of it as the print job's GPS. It's just a single letter, like C, L, U, or F. And that one letter tells the system everything it needs to know, like which operating system the printer is on, and exactly what kind of printing architecture to use. The simplest setup is local printing. This is just what it sounds like. The SAP server with that spool process is running on the very same machine that the printer is physically plugged into. It's the most direct route you can get. Then you have remote printing, which is way more common in big companies. Here, the SAP server is often a data center somewhere, and the printer you want is down the hall or on another floor, or heck, even in another country. The job has to be sent over the network to get where it's going. And finally, there's front-end printing. This is your classic print a receipt at the checkout counter scenario. It's for when the print job needs to go all the way from the central server back to the printer that's hooked up directly to your own computer. Perfect for when you're working from home, too. And this little chart here, well, it's basically the cheat sheet that puts it all together. When you set up a new printer in the system, you pick one of these codes. You'd pick L for a local printer on a Linux machine, or maybe U for a remote printer on a Unix network. And F, that's the one for front-end printing we just talked about. Each letter is a specific roadmap for the print job's journey. So we've followed this job from a simple click to a fully formed document, routed perfectly to the right printer. Let's just step back for a second and ask, why is it designed this way? Why all this complexity? At the end of the day, the whole system's speed and efficiency comes down to this really smart way of splitting up the work. The dialog process is built for speed. It creates the job in a flash and then immediately frees you, the user, up to do your next task. It leaves the slow, heavy work of formatting and sending the data to the dedicated spool process, which can chug along in the background. This design is absolutely crucial for keeping the whole system fast and responsive for thousands of users at once. So, what are the big things to remember? First, there's a huge difference between the initial spool request and the final output request. Second, the specialized spool process does all the hard work of formatting. And finally, those access methods are the GPS guiding print jobs through all the different architectures, local, remote, and front-end. This is the whole system that allows a massive global company to reliably manage thousands of print jobs every single day. And that wraps up our journey. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Every time we click a button on a screen, there's this entire hidden world of processes working perfectly in the background. What other simple clicks are powered by this kind of invisible complexity? Thanks for joining me.